name is Janan. I am the National Events and Outreach Manager for CAIR, Council on American Islamic Relations, and it's very nice to have all of you here. A special thank you to Representative Judy Chu for hosting us today, and we will start with brief remarks from her.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. I am privileged to be here today for this very important report. I want to applaud the Council on American Islamic Relations for their efforts in producing this report and for their tireless work on behalf of Muslim Americans and their work in advancing the civil rights for all of us. The findings in this report targeted is that the Trump administration's anti-Muslim rhetoric and policy have put Muslim Americans at risk, and hate crimes and anti-bias incidents are clearly on the rise. The number of anti-Muslim bias incidents increased by 17%. And what is really alarming is that our own federal agencies account for 35% of those incidents. There's no mystery as to why. We have a president who's won the election by demonizing Muslims and telling others to fear them. He was even criticized by allies like Britain's Prime Minister for promoting bigoted videos that falsely smeared Muslims. Now, prejudice, ignorance, and hate are unfortunately nothing new. But with the announcement of his Muslim ban, Trump's anti-Muslim bigotry took a giant leap forward towards becoming American policy. And even though there was such a sloppy rollout, a chaotic rollout, and it has been repeatedly curtailed by the courts, the Muslim ban is still having a chilling effect on our country. Of the 2,599 anti-Muslim bias incidents from 2017 that were tracked in this report, 13% of those incidents were from individuals who've been targeted by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Another 10% were incidents of harassment or inappropriate targeting from the FBI. Those actions stem from those who are at the top and from leadership who cater to the president's obsession with isolating and targeting Muslims. But it's not just policy. The words and actions from our political leaders are encouraging individuals to act on their prejudices as well. That's reflected in the 15% increase in hate crimes documented in this report, and you can see it elsewhere as people now feel emboldened because of President Obama to espouse doctrines of hatred, racism, and bigotry. Who can forget that last year, Nazis and white supremacists marched proudly through Charlottesville, Virginia, even killing an American woman, only for the president to call them fine people. Well, it's no wonder that more openly white supremacist types are running for political office, and it further contributes to this cycle of rhetoric and further acts of hatred. This report isn't just about what's happening in this past, it's warning about what will come in the future if we don't stop it. And that means fighting the cruel and illegal Muslim ban. That's why I introduced a bill, H.R. 4271, along with Senator Chris Murphy, who introduced the identical Senate bill to block any federal funding from going forward towards the implementation of Trump's cruel Muslim ban. But it's also crucial that we put forward our vision of America as well, and that is the America that welcomes the contributions of all individuals. And that's why, before the start of Ramadan this year, I introduced House Resolution 869 to recognize the historic contributions of American Muslims to our country. And I tell you, it's such an inspirational resolution, and I thank CAIR for bringing this idea to me. Because it is really something, after you read through it, what Muslims have contributed to this country. It documents it all. They have served bravely in our military. They have stood under our flag at the Olympics. They've designed world-famous skyscrapers. They brought home Nobel Prizes. And so, Muslim Americans have made our country better throughout our history. and we should not let bigotry deprive us of their future contributions to this country. So this resolution is about ensuring that Muslims know that they have a home here, that they are appreciated, and that they are as American as anybody else. And it's also about the soul of our nation. We were founded on religious freedom and the belief that anybody could become an American. If we allow that to change now at the hands of a president who is pushing an agenda of fear and division, then we threaten the very ideas that make America the beacon of freedom, democracy, and opportunity to this world. So your report is such an important step in shining a light. I want to thank all of you for all of your hard work in preparing this and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you very much, Representative Chudo. Very inspiring words, and we appreciate the support that you've given CAIR, but also the Muslim community over the years. So I have been at CAIR for a little over a year now, and when I first applied for my job, I didn't realize the impact of CAIR's work on the community and things that had been happening since even before the elections. And it was something that I didn't realize how momentous it was going to be working with the community, but time and time again, I have actually, as my role is front-facing to the community, I've actually heard from the community how much they appreciate CAIR's work. And a report like Targeted actually shows them that, reporting these incidents and speaking out against these injustices is being calculated and is being heard by our representatives. And so it's very, very important. And this is a good segue into our next speaker, who is the founder, the current executive director of CAIR, Nihad Awad, who a lot of people are very familiar with. And a lot of the work that we have been doing could not be as successful without his guidance. So with that, let's please welcome Nihad to the podium.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon, and thank you very much all for coming. And special thanks to Representative Chu, who has been a leading advocate in Congress and in the community, defending religious liberties for all. Representative Chu introduced House Resolution 869 and other resolutions, but this is a unique resolution because it recognizes the history and contribution of American Muslims. And that is the narrative that we would like to talk about, and we would like to have the Congress and the nation to think about who American Muslims are instead of who they are not. Now, today we're talking about the special report. The special report is called Targeted. And this report has been issued for the past 20 years. And this is the first of its kind, the Muslim Civil Rights Report in the United States. What is different and new about this report is the fact that the sharp increase in anti-Muslim bias in 2017 is due to the policies of this administration. The Muslim ban is one of those policies, but the rhetoric, the anti-Muslim rhetoric, by a candidate Trump and throughout his presidency so far has emboldened Islamophobia and has weaponized Islamophobia. And that's why we saw 15% increase in hate crimes, 300 hate crimes against Muslims. And these bias incidents that you see in this report tell the story of hundreds of thousands of Muslims. We believe that most of the reports that happened and most of the incidents that happened nationwide go unreported. American Muslims are afraid to report most of the incidents that happened because of the fear of retaliation, and also they feel that this government is against them. So even if they report it to federal agencies, they feel that there is no hope that the government will do anything about it, because as Representative Chu said, and it's reported in the report, 35% of the incident increase is due to the anti-Muslim policies by this government. So it is unfortunate, it is demoralizing to American Muslims to feel that their own government is targeting them because of their faith. And this is unprecedented, that the US government is targeting a religious minority within the United States. I don't want to take away time from the panelists that we have, but we hope that members of Congress will conduct more briefings and hearings on the rise of Islamophobia and hate groups in the United States. We ask Congress to reject any policy and attempt to stigmatize and marginalize American Muslims. We urge members of Congress to endorse House Resolution 869 that was introduced by Representative Chu, and also encourage members of the Senate to start another resolution. We would like to assure American Muslims of their right in this country and also protect the best value that I believe we have, which is religious liberty in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nihad. Okay, so now we are going to start with some remarks from all of our panelists, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So first we have Catherine from Shoulder to Shoulder. Shoulder to Shoulder is a national campaign of religious and interfaith organizations dedicated to ending anti-Muslim bigotry in the United States and around the world. I have attended many of their events over the last year. Catherine is wonderful. Her organization is absolutely amazing. So without further ado, Catherine.
Great. Thank you. Is this on? Thank you. So as Janan said, my name is Catherine Orsborn. I direct the Shoulder to Shoulder campaign, which is a coalition of 35 national religious denominations and organizations that have come together to stand with our Muslim neighbors against anti-Muslim discrimination in the United States. This coalition includes the National Council of Churches, the Union for Reform Judaism, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and many other Christian and Jewish partners at the national institutional level. Anti-Muslim bigotry is not only an affront to American Muslims, though of course, as we see in this report, American Muslims are adversely affected in violent and direct ways. But anti-Muslim bigotry is also an affront to American values and to the many faiths that call this country home, as we all equally rely on America's commitment to religious freedom for all. We've also seen this before. We've seen other faith communities targeted. We've seen Catholics, Quakers, Baptists, the Jewish community, just to name a few that have been targets of religious bigotry in our country in the past, and we don't want to go there again. So we have to be standing together against all targeting of faith communities. So before sharing a bit more about how people of all faiths can be and are mobilizing to address the bigotry that's outlined in this report, I want to make just a couple brief comments about Islamophobia itself. Islamophobia is not a new phenomenon, but in the United States it's gained new energy, and we see new manifestations of it in the past several years. It's important to point out the Islamophobia industry, a set of organizations and individuals that are actively promoting anti-Muslim hate, and that plays a role in this, especially when they're given political platforms and access. These intentional efforts to denigrate Islam and Muslims are combined with a general lack of knowledge and understanding in the U.S. public, as well as news coverage of acts of extremist violence abroad that are skewed in their emphasis. These elements have combined to create something of a perfect storm, fueling anti-Muslim sentiments in the United States. Finally, the legacies of and the history of racism in this country play an important role as well, as we continue to wrestle as a society with a history of white supremacy, and I think this has been made very clear over the past several years in particular. So Shoulder to Shoulder is the largest interfaith coalition specifically focused on the issue of anti-Muslim bias. We work not only with our 35 national member organizations and denominations, but also with over 60 smaller organizations on local levels across the United States to educate, mobilize, and equip non-Muslim faith communities to effectively respond to anti-Muslim discrimination in their own locales and to take ownership and responsibility of this issue as well. So I want to take time with you today just briefly to share a few specifics of how faith communities and leaders have been stepping up, especially as anti-Muslim bigotry has escalated in the political climate of the last couple of years in the U.S. First, we focus much energy and time meeting with and sharing information and resources with non-Muslim faith leaders, offering trainings for pastors, for instance, at Christian gatherings in the U.S., and creating our own conferences and trainings to support leaders who are interested in and committed to supporting their Muslim neighbors, but aren't always sure exactly how to do that. So we provide them entry points, resources, and trainings to deepen their work in this arena and connect them to our Muslim partners throughout the country. So in order to do this work well, we're in regular conversation and consultation with a diversity of Muslim partners that we work with. Because of the current political climate in the US, our work in the past several years has involved a large number of rapid response efforts, reacting to incidents or efforts to harm the Muslim community. As I've already noted, we see faith leaders across the country stepping up on this issue. When a mosque in Louisville, Kentucky was vandalized, some local partners were able to work together to quickly draw together hundreds of people of faith and community members to physically repaint the building together after Friday prayers that week. The turnout of supporters was so large that traffic was blocked for hours on a major highway. As another example, there was a recent effort by an anti-Muslim organization to have protests at mosques across the US. Many will remember this. We immediately connected with partners across the country, and we were able to get hundreds of people of faith to join Muslims at their mosques that day in solidarity in whatever way the particular mosque was wanting. And the allies far outnumbered the anti-Muslim protesters, as you'll see in the media coverage of these events. Additionally, we've supported faith leaders through our trainings, resource cultivation, and one-on-one support to lead critical conversations in their own communities, at houses of worship, in small groups, in Sunday school forums, and things like this. These efforts are reaching non-Muslim people of faith across the country who are deluged with misinformation about American Muslims, and they lack the relationships and knowledge to correct this misinformation. Faith leaders are helping to change the tide on this. As just one example, after her small Minnesota town experienced a wave of anti-Muslim rhetoric targeting the one Muslim family that lived there, the town doctor, a young Lutheran pastor in that small town started leading community conversations in her church and engaging others in the community to hear directly from the Muslim family. I think I read on one of the reports that 75% of the town turned out to one of the town halls that they held. So she's lifting her own voice, but more importantly, I think, is providing a platform and space for people in her community to hear stories directly from American Muslims, and they've seen a shift in the rhetoric in their town. So that's just one example of how some of these faith leaders partnering with Muslim communities are able to start changing the tide on the ground, because we need to change the politics around this, and we need to change what's happening on the ground in communities. So I think that this is part of the silver lining, if we can call it that, of the rise in anti-Muslim discrimination in the US, is that people across the country have come out and made effort to get to know their Muslim neighbors and to support them in the face of hate. This is the message that I want to share today, that there are many, many people here in the US that want to create communities of respect and inclusion. So our work collectively is to identify those people, to connect them with other people, and to help equip them with the information and the resources and the relationships that they need to make a public stand and to build deeper relationships for the long haul and to change the politics and communities for the better. So part of our collective vision is to stop seeing human and civil rights as zero-sum, meaning that if you gain in rights, then it must take away some of mine somehow. Instead, we have to see our rights as wrapped up with one another, especially when we're talking about issues related to religious liberty, so that we can all advance together in the direction of dignity, fairness, and respect for each person and community in our society. I believe that we're stronger in this work when we're working together, advancing inclusion and justice for all, and people looking to engage more in this work can join our campaign. We will work with them to connect them to others, to lift their voices, to organize and network in their communities in order to build a better community for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So now we are going to hear from the report's author. Zainab has done a fantastic job, and I hope everyone was able to receive a copy. We do have a lot of copies out here for you to take with you. And this report really was well written. The data was presented very clearly, and it's already received a lot of recognition in the media. A lot of organizations have used the data inside in order to present on hate crimes against Muslims. So without further ado, I'd like to present Zainab to present her findings.
Thank you, Janan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming today to attend this briefing on CAIR's 2018 Civil Rights Report, Targeted, which, as Nahan mentioned, is the only report of its kind, providing both hard numbers and real stories of the impact of Islamophobia on the lives of American Muslims. So freedom of religion is a foundational ideal of our nation. Americans who are Muslim, like all Americans, possess the right to practice their faith accordingly to their sincerely held religious beliefs. Like any person in America, irrespective of religion or race, American Muslims deserve to be treated, as Catherine said, with dignity, fairness, and respect. Yet, we have witnessed an increase in the onslaught of both institutional and individual prejudice against American Muslims in 2017. Targeted presents the data on, impact of, and legal pushback against anti-Muslim bias in the U.S. Never before in our nation's history have reported anti-Muslim hate crimes been as high a number as in 2017. Throughout the year, our CAIR offices nationwide received almost daily reports of hate crimes targeting an American who is Muslim or was perceived to be Muslim. Dozens of Americans were shot, severely beaten, or killed. In most hate incidents, the perpetrators expressed the same anti-Muslim slurs repeated daily in mainstream media and often by candidates and politicians. In the report, the section titled Invoking Trump, Provoking Fear, the Unprecedented Nature of the 45th President as a Symbol of Hate, we see evidence that the 45th President's brazen display of animosity and prejudice has emboldened people seeking to express their bias and made the very word Trump an encapsulating and potent symbol of wide-ranging racial and religious animus. Both adults and children have begun to use Trump to taunt and harass strangers, colleagues, and classmates. For example, an American Muslim child was insulted with a slur at school and told that Trump was going to kick out the terrorists like him because all they did was quote-unquote bomb. In another incident, American Muslims received a threat stating, "There's a new sheriff in town, President Donald Trump. He's going to cleanse America and make it shine again. And he's going to start with you Muslims. He's going to do to you Muslims what Hitler did to the Jews." In yet another incident in Texas, a man approached a Muslim family at a beach and launched into an obscene tirade. Among other actions, he screamed, "Donald Trump will stop you." Let that sink in for a moment. People are invoking the name of a sitting American president, the highest executive office in the nation, as a symbol of hatred and prejudice to inspire fear in racial and religious minorities. This is unprecedented in American history. This peddling of fear has been further promoted by the Islamophobia network, with which the Trump administration has close ties. In his original dictate for a complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States, President Trump cited a defective and inaccurate poll conducted by the Center for Security Policy, an extremist anti-Muslim think tank. In the report section titled #NoMuslimBan, Not Now, Not Ever, we delve deeper into the ban's Islamophobic origins, content, and trajectory. It is inarguable that in addition to direct discrimination and a curtailment of rights, the Muslim ban has also had a stigmatizing effect on American Muslims. Soon after the first version was announced, a Baltimore mother described finding her 10-year-old daughter crying when she picked her up from school. A friend had told the girl that she wasn't allowed to be friends with people who wear those things on their head. It is unfortunate that while such bigotry receives arguably free rein, the government has simultaneously sought to restrict the right of Americans to free speech on issues of political, social, and economic importance. The report section titled Violating the First Amendment documents the states that have either adopted or attempted to adopt legislation, resolutions, or executive orders that impose restrictions on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Another section of the report, titled The Unconstitutional Terrorist Watch List, in turn delves into the decade-long expansion of the unconstitutional watch list system and relates the stories of several impacted American Muslims whose lives have been profoundly disrupted. In one particularly egregious case, CAIR represented Imam Yusuf Abdi, a U.S. citizen and imam in Utah, who had traveled to Kenya to bring his wife and children, who had just received their green cards, to the U.S. When Imam Yusuf, his wife and family, arrived at the airport in Kenya with all their belongings, they were forced to return upon learning that the U.S. government had placed Imam Yusuf on the no-fly list. It was in part due to the efforts of lawyers at CAIR, including Lena, who is here today, that the imam was granted entry back into the U.S. and allowed to return home. With that overview, I now turn to provide the key data findings contained in our report. The charts will be visible on the screens next to you. 1. Islamophobic bias continues its trend toward increasing violence. CAIR reported a 17% increase in anti-Muslim bias incidents in 2017 over 2016. This was accompanied by a 15% increase in hate crimes targeting American Muslims, including children, youth, and families over the same time period. 2. Federal government agencies instigated the single greatest number of anti-Muslim bias incidents at 919. This is 35% of the total number of bias incidents in 2017 and a 70% increase as compared to 2016. CAIR also documented that 464 of these incidents were related to the unconstitutional Muslim ban. 3. The most frequent types of incidents documented by CAIR in 2017 involved harassment, which was defined as a non-violent or non-threatening incident of bias, customs and border protection, hate crimes, FBI, and employment discrimination. 4. The most prevalent triggers of anti-Muslim bias incidents documented by CAIR in 2017 were the victim's perceived ethnicity or national origin, a headscarf, the unconstitutional Muslim ban, and everyday Muslim activities. As the data shows, incidents of anti-Muslim prejudice are not only increasing, they are increasingly perpetrated by the government. To mitigate and turn the tide on the rising hate and prejudice, it is important that elected officials use their platforms to make statements reminding fellow Americans of our shared values. Additionally, our elected officials should not provide platforms to anti-Muslim hate groups that promote Islamophobia and spread hate and fear. Specific recommendations are contained in the report regarding each of the aforementioned policy issues. I highly encourage each of you to read the report, share it with your offices, your friends, and your family. As we at CAIR work to empower American Muslims, our broader goal is to set legal precedent, pass laws, and shape a society which guarantees that the promise of America holds true for future generations. We envision a nation in which all Americans enjoy their fundamental right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zainab. That is a lot of information, but again, hopefully everybody can grab a copy of the report on their way out and look into it a little bit further to see all of the details that she mentioned. You know, it's due to all of our chapters across the country as well. We have over 35 chapters, and so they also collect data from their respective areas, and so this is data that we were able to collect with the help of them. And so we can all agree that, you know, there's a lot of information, but at the same time, as Nihad said, a lot of reports do still go unreported because of the fear. So we're hoping when people see these types of reports, they're encouraged that there are people who are listening and there are people who will take this seriously enough to be able to include it in reports that other people and allies will read. Next, we are going to hear from Lena. Lena Masri is the CAIR executive, here we go. The CAIR National Litigation Director and Acting Civil Rights Director, and she has a background as a civil rights attorney and human rights activist. She leads our department at the national office, and they have been doing phenomenal work over the last year. And so I thank Lena personally for all of the great work they've been doing. It's very inspiring. So without further ado, let's hear from Lena.
Thank you. So CAIR is America's largest civil rights and civil liberties advocacy organization. We have over 40 attorneys throughout the country that are currently taking cases and providing legal services to American Muslims whose rights have been violated. And in representing these individuals, they compile statistics, compile data, and that's where these numbers come from. The data, though, when we look at the numbers, it's hard to remember. Sometimes we forget that each one of those numbers represents a face. Each number represents a human, a family that's been destroyed, a human life that's been destroyed. And truthfully, the cases that we get on a daily basis, that all of the CAIR attorneys get on a daily basis, are truly heartbreaking. And it's hard to relay that. And as much as I try to figure out a different way every time I give one of these talks to help people understand how heartbreaking these stories are, it's very difficult. It's important to understand, and Zainab has mentioned that the majority of our cases in the last year were either related to the Muslim ban or Customs and Border Protection, the FBI. The Customs and Border Protection, FBI, a lot of those cases are directly related to the watch list. And it's important to understand the Muslim ban against the backdrop of policies and practices that have already been in place for many, many years that target the Muslim community, that have resulted in treating the Muslim community as second-class citizens, and that have resulted in the destruction of families well before the Muslim ban was put in place. The terror watch list, which we know has over 1 million individuals on it, we know that it has thousands upon thousands of American Muslims on it. All of these individuals were added to the terror watch list without any semblance of due process. And they're not even notified that their rights have been taken from them until their lives are caught in an invisible web of consequences. And it extends far beyond being added to the no-fly list and being prevented from boarding a flight. It extends far beyond the lengthy detentions and secondary screening, interrogations about their religious beliefs and practices every single time they go through an airport. It goes far beyond being handcuffed at the border with guns surrounding them, pointed in their direction. Many of these individuals have actually left the United States altogether because of the treatment that they're receiving. One of our plaintiffs, after arriving back to the United States from Canada with his family, with his young kids and his wife, was pulled out of his car and treated like a terrorist. He was thrown against his car, handcuffed in front of his kids. And the guns were pointed so close in his direction that he thought, either by accident or intentionally, I'm gonna die. He was convinced that he was gonna die. And because of that incident, he left the United States. And he left his kids and his wife here so that they can pursue their education. And they have been separated for years. This is a forced separation that happened as a result of the terror watch list and the way that it's being implemented against the American Muslim community. Zainab also mentioned the incident of Imam Abdi. He is one of many, many American Muslims who we filed emergency lawsuits on behalf of because the government adds them to the no-fly list after they leave the country, knowing full well that they are abroad. A lot of these individuals are interrogated about their travel a few days before they leave by the FBI, and the FBI indicates that they know that they're leaving, and yet they allow them to leave, so clearly they're not a security threat on the flight. They allow them to leave the country, but then they add them to the no-fly list and prevent them from returning. These American Muslims are also being separated from their families. One of our plaintiffs he flew to Jordan for personal reasons. He was added on the no-fly list, and he ended up being there for 2 years because he couldn't get back. We had a client from Bosnia. When he went to visit his family because he wanted to see his family in Bosnia, he ended up getting stranded there for 5 or 6 months, unable to return until we filed and got involved in his case as well. And there are several other cases like this. The other issue with the terror watch list is these individuals' immigration petitions for their spouses, their immediate relatives, remain pending indefinitely. They remain in administrative processing. So we have a lot of clients whose families have been forcibly separated for years because the government refuses to process their applications. Couples are unable to reunite. A lot of families are permanently destroyed. A lot of those families retain hopes in reuniting, retain hopes that their applications would eventually be adjudicated. And now the Muslim ban is implemented and their hopes are forever destroyed because their family relatives cannot come anymore simply because they're Muslim. So I share these stories with you because it's important that we look at the bigger picture. It's not just the Muslim ban. The Muslim ban is an accumulation of policies and practices that have been targeting the Muslim community for many, many, many years. The Muslim community right now feels that it is being targeted, that it is being treated as second-class citizens. And if we really want to resolve these issues that we're talking about here today, we have to step back, we have to look at the broader policies and understand what the larger goals are and attack them from that perspective. I'm available to answer questions about the rest of our cases. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it over.
Thank you very much, Lena. Again, the work that the legal department does is very important. As part of the outreach that I do with the community, we frequently hold legal clinics and know your rights seminars. That way, a lot of the information that Lena's talking about is known to the community, and they kind of know things ahead of time. And that way they know that we have a resource. So if they do end up having a problem, they're not waiting 6 months or 2 years, stranded overseas without knowing who to call or what to do. And Lena and her team have always been very supportive in attending those events, so thank you very much. Okay, our last speaker on the panel before we go into Q&A is Abed Ayoub. He's actually one of my friends from the Midwest, so it's always good to see him. He works at ADC, which is the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, as the Legal and Policy Director. ADC is a civil rights organization committed to defending the rights of people of Arab descent and promoting their rich culture. So please give it up, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want to thank CAIR for putting together a great report. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. So let's give a round of applause for the team at CAIR, who within the past few years, actually for a while now, have been the gold standard of Muslim American organizations. So I really commend you on your work that you've been doing. The report is very telling. I mean, the numbers are there for you in black and white to see the impact this administration has had, but also the level, the way we've been increasing slowly over the past few years. So it didn't necessarily start with Trump, but he sure expedited that, the growth in Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Arab sentiment in this country. I'm going to talk briefly about a few things, but just as a backgrounder, ADC we're almost 40 years old. We're the largest Arab American civil rights organization. We're structured very similarly to CAIR, where we have chapters across the country and a legal department handling cases and intake. So a lot of the cases Lena was mentioning, we receive similar calls, similar stories, and the impact is there. A lot of the cases we also do receive, and the impact, it's important to remember the impact of Islamophobia doesn't necessarily only impact Muslims. We do have a number of our clients, a number of individuals we work with that are Arab Christians. We've had churches that have been vandalized. We've had Arab Christians on the job who have been, called terrorists or screamed Allahu Akbar at or just presumed to be Muslim. In fact, we have a number of Latinx community members, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Mexican, that are being discriminated against because their employer or they walk into a store or place and they believe they're Arab or they're Muslim. One case in particular stands out as an individual who's non-Arab, non-Muslim, went to work, he's a construction worker, and he took his toolbox, made a bomb out of it, and put a turban on top of it. And they thought this guy was an Afghan, but he was just a young man from South Florida. So you could see that these case examples are there and the communities are really impacted. But that's why it's important also the work that Shoulder to Shoulder is doing, bringing all parties, all impacted communities to the table to work together to try to overcome the issues we're currently facing. And this is again another reason why the work CAIR does is so important. Is there's going to be the advocacy stuff we do with the community, the education stuff, but we're at a point now where without legal services, without taking these issues head on in the courtroom, it's going to be hard to overcome what this administration is doing. And you can focus on the Russia investigation, all that's going on right now. We have to deal with this. Is if we have another full 2 years with this guy in office, and that's 2 more years of policies and of rhetoric. And once Trump does leave office, whenever that is, the rhetoric doesn't stop. It's not like we immediately go back into an era where Islamophobia is gone and discrimination is gone. It will probably get worse depending on how things play out. So we do need to be prepared as a community in addressing that. There are a number of ways for us to get involved. Of course, get involved with CAIR, get involved with the local chapters, but it's also important to center the Muslim American voices that are working on these issues and promote them and empower them, and especially the young leadership to empower them on these issues, to train them on how to address these issues so they can go back into the communities. The issue we see at ADC, which I've heard mentioned a couple times, is the underreporting. Oftentimes we receive calls from clients and we want to help them, we want to push things forward, in the last minute they're like, no, I'm not comfortable, I just called to tell you that this happened, but I'm not comfortable pursuing it. So that's a problem. Or you would hear a friend of somebody that's been discriminated against call on their behalf and say, my friend doesn't want to come forward. So we need to get over this stigma of being discriminated against is bad. We need to have these individuals come forward and do the reporting. Because statistics that are coming from CAIR, from ADC, and from others are more accurate than the statistics coming forward from the FBI, where reporting is voluntary. And you have some cities that show 0 hate crimes. So this is very important work, and it's very important to overcome that stigma and get these people to come forward and with their discrimination. The other area we're seeing a increase on, where it's important to get into, of course, is bullying and what's happening at schools, particularly not just from other students, other teachers. That's why it's important to get this report out to school districts, get this report out and the work out to educators to let them know here's what's happening. We are receiving, as well as at ADC, an increase in those cases. So I'll answer some questions, but in closing, I just want to say again, the work CAIR is doing is important. This report is very important, and just do keep in mind the impact this has on non-Arab, non-Muslims, community members. I think you had a statistic in there that showed, national origin discrimination is up there as one of the top reasons people are discriminating against. So that's something to keep in mind, that this issue is impacting from Arab, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, atheist, Jewish. People are being discriminated against, and we're part of a larger xenophobic movement that's in the U.S. now, and that's unfortunately overtaken a lot of these government policies, a lot of what this administration is putting in place. But God willing, with the work people on the table, people in this room are doing, will overcome these challenges. So on that buzzer, thank you, and we'll take your questions.